Before we start speaking about that topic, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, who you are, what are you currently doing, what's your background?
Yeah, certainly can. So my name's John Stockdale. I'm a career planner by trade. First full-time job out of university, really, and like many people, I never planned to go into planning. So I started as a real-time analyst. I worked my way through the department, and more recently, I'm currently the head of optimization and insight at Diligenta.
It's such a great career you're having. Like, for how many years you've been in planning now?
Oh, that is a question. 2022, 23, so probably about 20 years now. So
Amazing.
obviously there's something about it.
Obviously, and I'm absolutely certain that you have some stories to share and things, yeah, and things that you would like to discuss. So on the back of one of my posts, you actually reached out to me and you phrased it in such a good way that I really wanted to not only speak about it, but use it as well. You said something like planners are people too. And it's very important to talk about it because for me, it feels like being a planner, it often is like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're getting the pressure from the team leads, from the agents, eventually from the senior stakeholders. And it's difficult to be a planner. Like you're getting a lot of tense situations. So I was just curious to hear more about what what do you mean by that planners are people too? What does it mean to you?
Well, it came off the back of some really good advice I think Steve gave in the last session. And he was talking about the importance of planning being engaged with people from the very start when they join in induction, to give planning a face, an opportunity to engage with people and to talk them through the processes, help them with their introduction to the business and explain a little bit about what planning do behind the scenes, which can be really, really powerful. I think sometimes it is possible to get stuck behind the numbers or be the guy behind the spreadsheet, and planning can, as the agent on the phone, feel a little bit faceless, especially if you've put a request in, it gets declined, you don't really understand why. So I thought it was great advice from Steve, and I thought it was something that you have to be very conscious and deliberate about doing, but the benefits of being engaged with the operation, sharing some of the backstory, while you won't always make people happy all the time, at least giving people some understanding and a point of contact that they can reach out to, someone they recognise, I think can be really powerful. And I think it can save a lot of friction in the long run by being more engaged with the operation and by building that advocacy and understanding with them.
You're spot on, and you mentioned as well, like brilliant advice from Steve as well. And I can certainly say that in the beginning of my career, I was put in a situation where the whole WFM team was set on the outside, and they were not, or we were not really involved back at the time with agents, which caused for a lot of frictions because then, as you mentioned, we're seen as those sitting behind the desk, just running some calculations, rejecting stuff for the sake of rejecting stuff. And kind of the psychological aspect and communication part of planning was missing. And I very often speak about that. For me, the communication and managing relationship is often even more important than the technical aspect of planning, because you can be absolutely brilliant, you can do the most amazing planning, the most amazing forecasting, and if people are not on board with it, they're going to sabotage you, they're not going to agree with you, they're going to overrule you, so everything will go in the bin, to put it politely.
Absolutely, completely agree.
Yeah, and another thing that I'm very fascinated about is indeed the psychological aspect, because we are often the ones saying no to requests. So saying yes, it's great, it's good, it's what everyone wants to hear, but it's not always possible. And if we're not communicating well enough with agents directly, it often goes really, really wrong. People are getting into sickness leave, they're getting demotivated doing their job, Or the other aspect, they just go complain to team lead go complain to their operations manager, and you can either be overruled or a lot of nasty situations can occur in front of your desk. So I don't know about you two guys, but I personally have been screamed at, things have been thrown in the office, and I think it's also normal because working in a contact center calls for so much tension and pressure that if you isolate the different functions from one another, it can only go that far, that situation. So what do you think about this?
So I think ultimately, collectively, the output is greater than the sum of its parts. Having that, being engaged, being a person that is recognized, while people may not be happy with that decision, may want to escalate to their team leader, I think it's important that people know that there may not be an answer yes this time, but there may be an alternative. And if you're that person that they can approach and discuss an alternative with, you can potentially avoid some of that escalation process by having given the person an understanding of the reasons for a decline, and then being open to working with them on a compromise or a middle ground that can help them get to where they want to, maybe not their original request, but you can maybe take 2 or 3 steps of escalation out of that process by being open and being engaged, and again, being recognized as someone who can also help, not just decline a holiday request, decline a shift swap, decline a change of hours. So being open and engaged and being active in engaging with the operation to work through some of those challenges can help just build a better relationship and a better brand and image for planning, to really tackle some of what you call, the bad old days of, get them in, get them out, and do it quickly.
I fully agree with you. And you mentioned something that I just wrote down as building WFM as a better brand and image. And I think we should collectively really advocate for this one, because still to this day, I cannot understand why planning is seen as a completely separated function that should have never been talked to, and they are just the people in the corner behind the desk doing some sort of weird calculations in Excel, when it's about managing your resource. So they should be the most engaged people with your agents in the end, rather than the opposite. And that led me to another discussion that I had a couple of months ago. Who do you think should be responsible if no is the answer? Is it you as a planner potentially that has to discuss that with the agent and look for alternatives, or the no should be provided to the agent by their team lead?
I think it can depend on the situation, and it can depend on the significance of the request that is being made. Obviously, anything to do with leave, pay, vacation is personal to the individual. So it is unique to them, and there could be other reasons for that request other than just wanting to take the day off. In a sensitive situation, the relationship exists with the team leader, and obviously, if escalation was required or further conversation, we don't necessarily need the backstory and wouldn't necessarily expect it. But if it was a casual request and it was something that I was just trying to get Friday afternoon off, but if there's something else available, I think that's where planning can step in to offer an alternative, because similar to forecasting or scheduling, there's never one answer. There's always a middle ground, an extreme, and a less likely event. So where we can offer alternatives, I think we should offer alternatives to offer a richer service and a more engaging service for essentially our internal customers.
Fully agree with you. And I think it's very important for planners and team leads to be seen as united front, because on the other hand, I, as a planner, what was I often very annoyed about was team leads overruling me constantly. So this leads to additional type of friction that should never be there, because as much as we want and we need and we have to put ourselves in the shoes of both the team leads and their agents. It should work the other way around. And there are a lot of solutions that we can advise on, and you're absolutely right. Depending on the situation, that message can come either from the planning team or from the team leads, but in the end, they should be united front because it's all for the good of the agents, of the business, and of the company. But what is the advice that we can do for the better of the planning teams? Because I have not seen or heard enough discussion on the market. How do we make the job easier for the planners? Because we're often on the receiving end of everything from operations. So what can we do to smoothen that kind of an impact that can have on the planners?
It's an interesting question because obviously there is so much you can do with technology through automation, shift swaps, bidding, vacation requests, and that can obviously take a lion's share of the low-hanging fruit out, so that the planners are focused on the meatier stuff or the more complex cases. And I think there's a healthy balance to be struck there between the technology and the person.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I'm often thinking as well that we may need to invest a little bit more in our planning team well-being, whether this is some sort of events that we're offering, whether this is some type of coaching or what have you. But we need to do something a bit. My biggest concern is in planning team that planners often change jobs because the pressure tend to be quite a lot. So if you reach a certain point in one organization, you tend to go somewhere else. And often in conversations, or what I have experienced, is that you at some point don't feel satisfied with how you're treated at your job, and that might not necessarily have anything to do with your conditions, like with your contract, with flexibility benefits, or anything like that. For me personally, if I'm put in a situation where no matter what I do, I'm constantly overruled, that takes away the satisfaction of doing my job. And I want to be satisfied. I want to feel empowered. I want to feel motivated. And we can speak a lot about WFM tools or others that take the edge or that are enabling other type of flexibility and features to support the agents, team leads, and planners. But I feel like there should be something else that we can introduce in the organizations to help with that as well.
I think it's an interesting topic. So I think particularly seeing it a lot in the planning field, there's always a drive to be perfect, to be right all the time. And I think sometimes we put ourselves under too much pressure. And I think there is, there is maybe call to step back and look at it and have a conversation almost with yourself, with your team manager, and look at the progress that you've made, because it can be really, really easy to be busy all the time, always doing something and putting other people first.
Mm-hmm.
But the odds of being right all the time versus the odds of making continued progress are a lot more in your favor if your objective is to make continual progress. You've got a lot better chance if you're making continual progress and getting better every day than you would have in terms of odds of being perfect all the time. And actually, maybe it's an open and honest conversation about you're not expected to be perfect all the time. Your goal and your objective should be to continually grow, because the odds are stacked so much more in your favor if it is continual progress as your objective rather than trying to be perfect all the time, to take away some of that pressure. And then obviously a healthy conversation about how you develop in your career. And this loops back a little bit to being engaged with the operation and being somebody that people can see what you're doing and you can encourage a bit of interest, because I think some of the best resources that come into planning teams come from within the operation, and having that engagement lets them see what you're doing and spark a bit of interest and encourage those people who have an aptitude and do want to go into planning. So first and foremost, it's a gateway. That engagement is a gateway to bringing people into the team and developing them, and having an honest and a healthy conversation about how they want to develop their career, you know, what a structured PDP looks like, what their long-term objectives are. And once people are in, they realize that there are so many opportunities within planning, and you can be a specialist in a particular field if you want to be a pure data MI guy or a data scientist, or you want to specialize in forecasting, or whether you like the buzz of real time and you like that pace. So there's so many avenues that are opened up once you're in that field. And then in terms of when you're looking for your next opportunity, you're already starting that journey to say, well, where do I want to go and what is the next opportunity? And is that necessarily external of the organization? Or is it something I can do internally? Or is it something I just want to specialize in? And I want to be the best scheduler I can be, or the best real-time analyst can be? Or do you want to go into management and do you want to be more involved in people? There's so many avenues. And as long as you're having those up front, regular conversations in your one-to-ones and your mid-years and through your own personal development plan, you can help to map that path out, and then hopefully avoid getting into that situation where you feel you have to leave just to make the next leap.
And I think you put it so well, and I absolutely loved what you said. And I am personally guilty of falling into that trap, especially in the beginning of my career, of wanting to be perfect. And I just remember there were so many situations where I have created the best possible schedule, considering all of the constraints that we had back at the time. And then I published the schedule and it turns out crap because nobody was happy with it. But I spent so much time trying to work on it that I didn't work on the communication aspect at all. And in the end, it's also a way to keep yourself too busy by not doing necessarily the most important stuff.
It's a very good point. I think one of the best pieces of advice anyone ever gave me was that it's not that anyone questions that you haven't got the numbers and you haven't got the answer. The problem might be that you might have too many numbers, and the challenge is going to be working out how you communicate the key information to the key people at the right time.
Absolutely. Lars, you've been naturally quiet. I'm pretty sure that you're going to silence us both in a minute. So do you have any thoughts on the topic?
First of all, I've been really enjoying the conversation and just listening in. I think some really good points were made here. It's a combination of soft skills and hard skills, first of all, from a planner, which requires a certain kind of leadership towards its peers, right? But also leadership towards the planner. Like John just explained, how are you empowering your planning team to perform? But not just skills-wise, but also as a human being, right? And I think as a department, as a team, you want to implement certain processes, certain rules to remove that kind of personal influence, so to say, so you can make it more objective and communicate towards everyone why something is possible or not. And that way you should earn that trust and respect from, for example, team leads, that if someone says, yeah, but Irina said no, well, I guess then it's a no, but let's see, let's look into alternative solutions. Ultimately, you want them to have your back because everyone believes in the process, in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe as a conclusion of this conversation, it's again very important to mention that planners are people too. And what I have often seen is that they are completely left on their own once they're in organization. Not often there is metrics, if you will, that can actually show whether planners themselves are doing a good job. Maybe they need some support with something. Maybe they need coaching, training, whatever. They're kind of left to do stuff on their own, and they're only judged by the organizational targets and KPIs they might not necessarily have any influence or impact on. So it's a very interesting conversation. What can we do to further enable and empower planners to do a great job and respect their well-being as well.
I think
So
that most of all, to be fair, we as management, for example, should ask our planners, how do you feel about this?
mhm,
How did you feel about last week? How do you feel now? Maybe even give them a mental health day once in a while. Just give them a break. Just do something else that you like, or focus a day on reporting, but don't spend any time with people. Look for ways that work for everyone in the team, cover each other, and work on something that is sustainable for the future.
fully agree. And thank you both for that conversation.